In the deepest parts of eastern Nigeria, where the forest swallowed secrets, a desperate father made a bargain no human should ever make. People said wealth entered his house overnight, new cars, new land, bundles of cash. But every midnight, his daughter screamed from inside a locked room. And one rainy night, the village finally discovered what he had truly been doing to her for money. In the quiet village of Umuaka lived a man named Obinna, once respected, once hardworking, but life had crushed him. His wife died after a long illness. His business collapsed. Death followed him like a shadow. Some nights, he and his only daughter Ada slept hungry. Ada was just 16, beautiful, quiet, and deeply devoted to her father. Even when there was no food, she smiled and said, "Papa, God will help us." But God seemed silent. One evening, Obinna sat outside his leaking hut while rain poured heavily. Then an old man appeared from nowhere, barefoot, tall, eyes red like burning coal. The old man sat beside him and whispered, "Do you want wealth?" Obinna froze. "Who are you?" The old man smiled. "A friend to desperate men." Lightning flashed, and for 1 second, the old man's shadow looked like something with horns. The stranger introduced himself as Eze Dibia, a feared native doctor from the Forbidden Forest. Villagers whispered terrible stories about him. People said men visited him poor and returned rich beyond imagination, but their families never remained the same. Obinna should have walked away, but hunger weakens judgment. As Dibia leaned closer, "I can make you rich in 7 days." Obinna's breathing quickened. "What must I do?" The old man smiled slowly. Then he pointed toward the house, toward Ada, and whispered, "Her destiny carries massive wealth." Obinna frowned. "She's my daughter." The Dibia nodded. "Exactly." Then he handed Obinna a small black calabash. Inside it was a strange red powder. "Every midnight, mix this in her drinking water." Obinna stepped back. "What will happen to her?" The old man's face darkened. "Do not ask questions if you want riches." And that night, Obinna made the first mistake that destroyed his bloodline forever. At first, nothing happened. Ada only complained of nightmares. She said she saw dark figures standing beside her bed. Then, strange things began happening. Money started appearing mysteriously. Obinna woke one morning to find 500,000 wrapped inside a goat skin near his door. The next day, a businessman arrived from the city and paid cash for Obinna's abandoned land. Within weeks, Obinna became rich, very rich. He built a mansion, bought expensive cars. People in the village were shocked, but Ada became weaker every day. Her eyes sank deeply, her body trembled constantly, and every midnight, neighbors heard terrible screams. One woman swore she heard Ada shouting, "Papa, please, don't let them touch me." But whenever morning came, Obinna claimed she was sick. No one questioned him because in villages, people fear wealthy men. One night, Ada's best friend, Chioma, sneaked into the mansion. She had not seen Ada in weeks. The house felt strange, cold, too quiet. Then she heard muffled crying upstairs. Chioma followed the sound and discovered a heavy locked door. Behind it, Ada whispered weakly, "Chioma, help me." Chioma panicked. "Ada, what's happening?" Ada burst into tears. "Every night, they come for me." Thunder exploded outside. Then suddenly, footsteps approached. Heavy footsteps. Chioma hid quickly. Obinna appeared holding a lantern, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Eze Dibia. The native doctor looked directly toward Chioma's hiding spot and smiled, as if he could see her. What Chioma witnessed next would make her run into the forest, screaming before dawn. At exactly midnight, the room door opened. Chioma peeked through a crack, and her blood turned cold. Ada was sitting tied to a chair in the center of the room. Strange symbols covered the walls in blood. Candles burned with blue flames. Ezedibia began chanting. Then shadowy figures slowly appeared in the corners of the room. Not human, tall, black, moving unnaturally. Ada screamed violently, "Papa, please!" But Obinna stood there silently. Tears rolled down his face, yet he did nothing. Then Ezedibia shouted, "The spirits demand a price." Suddenly the candles exploded. Ada screamed louder than ever before, and downstairs, bags of money began appearing on the floor. Real cash, endless cash. Obinna stared at it trembling. At that moment, Chioma accidentally stepped on a broken bottle. Crack! Silence. Every shadow in the room stopped moving. Then slowly, they all turned toward the door. Chioma ran, barefoot, into the storm. The shadows chased her through the forest. She could hear whispers behind her. "You have seen too much." The next morning, the village woke to terrifying news. Ada was missing, gone, no trace. But something worse happened. Obina's mansion began leaking blood from the walls. People gathered outside, screaming. Then they heard Ada's voice from inside the house. "Papa sold me." Suddenly, every window shattered at once. Boom! And Obinna came outside, crawling on his knees. Madness filled his eyes. He screamed, "Take the money! Take everything!" But the bags of cash had changed. They were no longer money, only dry leaves stained with blood. 3 days later, villagers entered the mansion. What they found shocked the entire region. Obinna was dead inside Ada's locked room, his face frozen in terror, and on the wall above him, written in blood, were the words, "Every bargain collects its full payment." But Ada was never found. Some say she died. Others believe the spirits took her forever. Yet villagers still claim that during heavy rain, a girl's voice echoes from the abandoned mansion, crying, "Papa, why?" And anyone who hears it never sleeps peacefully again. Would you sacrifice someone you love for wealth? Comment below. And if you want more terrifying African stories based on dark village legends, subscribe now before this story disappears. Because the next one is even darker.